apologized in the last video about these things being really long. So I don't have to apologize again. It's blanket. Anyway, you can use the argument this is supposed to be a lecture that covers 2 hours and 45 minutes. So having it be, it's probably going to come out around 50. You're getting some discount. Anyway, structure and processes. And this is about my agility, response, and execution. What we've gone over in this class is fundamentally about how value, mission, structure. A lot of emphasis on processes and also personnel. So internally, how am I going to respond? The thing is, each one builds on another. And now you can really see why value is so important. And value also, what I mean by value is vision. I use them interchangeably. But it's the story of your company, and that's the core. And the question is, how do you support all that? Also, what are your internal networks? Meaning, do you have multiple divisions or whatever? How's that all arranged to be efficient? Again, everything has to give to someone else. And also externally, what about partners and suppliers? Now, in terms of performance and structure, there's a trade-off. And that's that in terms of efficiency, it's a you, meaning you need structure, you need rules, because, and this is why bureaucracies were created, because having people run around willy-nilly doesn't work. Also, the path and processors, there are more efficient ways to do things than other ways. However, if you have too much for it, then the rules become bigger than the mission itself, and so your efficiency goes in the crapper. It also has an impact on creativity, and notice that creativity comes earlier than the peak of efficiency, and that's that people can use some level of structure who are creative because they're inefficient and they don't have focus. But there comes a point where structure works against creativity. And so this is, the efficiency curve is called the U curve. And so, oh, excuse me. So when you see survivors in dynamic markets, they tend to have rules. And they follow those rules, and those rules guide them along. The processes work best for them. Pfizer, what do? For drugs, they rank molecules. Based on those molecules, they figure out, okay, this is how many projects we're going to support. We just can't keep adding projects. And then each project goes through a phase gate review. And what they try to do is kill bad projects early. GE had rules. Being a portfolio company, their demand was that you have to be number 1 or number 2 in your market, or you're not going to survive in the portfolio. They trimmed off their philosophy is at the bottom 10%, especially in a big company with like 300,000 employees. You have to keep trimming the fat off. And they wanted to have Six Sigma discipline. GE's in a lot of trouble right now, and that's that Jack Welch had it easy. I mean, he didn't have a downturn or anything to deal with. And then after 9/11 hit, that totally killed their jet engine business. Plus, they were asked to insure a lot of the lawsuits and things like that. I mean, it just got real ugly. The other thing is that they've made a lot of bad bets and acquisitions. Like they put a boatload of money into fossil fuel power plants, and nobody wants them anymore. And because they made all these acquisitions, and they were expensive acquisitions, they've got cash flow issues. And so what it came down to is we're a portfolio company. Hey, let's just willy-nilly make bets. But what they got away from was the rule of, are you number 1 or number 2 in your market? In Motorola, Bob Galvin instilled discipline in a culture of entrepreneurship. Don't feel failure, recognize it early, and let's give a quality product to the customer. And then what happened is Motorola's, when Galvin stepped down, and Chris Galvin, the son, or actually great-grandson or something like that, there were 4 generations of Galvins, and they lost their entrepreneurial spirit. They became a big company. It became about profit. The cell phone profits went to their head. And the biggest thing, though, is Bob Galvin had wanted and enforced accountability. When you look at Iridium, there's satellites in the air. They could have killed that so many times earlier. Instead, they lost billions of dollars and really messed up the company in the process. So we've talked about how the nature of being in a technology-based business has uncertainty, volatility, and we're cared about velocity. And so the question is how does structure help factors? There's an asymmetric effect where actually having structure is more value. You're better off muddling along in small increments and get by, which is what big companies do, than trying to do these big sweeping things, because more times than not, too much volatility, you're going to fail. There's a liability of newness, and that's that startups don't understand how to structure themselves, they don't execute well, and they implode. And I saw it left and right in Silicon Valley. They said, oh, well, it was our business model, or, we found out the customer didn't want or whatever. No, you just didn't execute. You didn't deliver on what you promised to deliver. That's why nobody bought it. The thing is, tech isn't exactly a U curve. It's more like a V curve. It's very sharp, and you have tipping points. And so, guess what? That makes it a lot more volatile. Complexity. When things are uncertain, you want to do everything, and you can't do everything. But you have to leave yourself room to pivot. People can impact the structure of your company. And that's it. If you have a bunch of creatives, nobody wants the correct structure. So you have to manage your content and the amount. Structure is a limit on action. That's what it is. So you still need creativity. So you need to constantly be changing your processes where it's appropriate and optimizing your structure. The next section is about capturing value, and that's about getting sustainable advantage. So in terms of invention versus value captured, the companies that really aren't that inventive, like Dell, were they really all that inventive? I mean, their PCs were just like anybody else's PCs. But what they did is they did more business model innovation, and that's why they did quite well. On the other hand, there are a lot of people who invented and did things, including my gyroscope. I mean, my gyroscope was the first of its kind in the world. You can look it up before. And it was a company that didn't understand how to create businesses. And subsequently, they got knocked off, they got copied, they wouldn't defend their patents, and it was just ugly. Who the heck is Charles Stack? He was the first one to come up with online book selling. And he got killed by Amazon. And Jonas Salk was the guy who made the polio vaccine. You would think somebody would do that with form a company, but no, he gave it away for free. And that's why there's no value captured. You have to capture, you're creating a value, so the question is, are you going to capture that value and bring it back to you? And so the champion companies were when Xerox came up with the Xerox process, DuPont came up with nylon, Bayer came up with the aspirin. Those are companies that capitalized on what they created. And so what drives this is your uniqueness. What's separating you? What's your secret sauce? And you use that to dominate. Subsequently, from that uniqueness, you're going to have to build up assets. And those assets give you scale and everything else. But those are the resources that make you dominate. And subsequently, it's still about the 5 forces in the value chain. It tells you what direction you're going into. When you look at the S-curve, early on, you're developing your uniqueness when you're fermenting and trying things. And then as time goes on, it's about building up assets. Those things are going to help you scale and make money. So the resources you build up feed your future, and that's what Intel was originally about, coming up with processes and coming up with great chip designs. Subsequently, once they started to grow, then Intel became all about factories. And then they needed to expand even further. What people don't know is Intel is actually the #1 motherboard company in the world also. And they also started to focus more and more on software internally to their chips. And so today, where are they? Well, they're worried about vertical integration, and that's other companies supplanting them, whether they're from above them or from below them. An example of that is Apple now. Apple says, you know, we're tired of buying other people's processors. We're going to design and make our own. Vertical integration. Their direct competition like AMD is not going away. And also, factories are becoming expensive. In order to keep up developing these assets, a fab is now $10 billion. That's a big bet to put down. So what is keeping Intel going? And why is Intel stock going up again? Because they realize at the core, their chip is about processing data. And so subsequently, they've got into IoT and data services type applications. And that's what's elevating them right now. But the things that you do feed forward. They feed into your future and make your future grow. So in terms of uniqueness, tech superiority puts you ahead of everybody else. But remember, where are you competing? What makes you unique? And you're either the best product, the best price, or you know the customer better than anyone else. Once you understand your strengths, you scale. That's the way you get market dominance. Your resources control that scale. However, the niche eaters are going to come after you. Those 1,000 guys who say, let's just take part of their market away. Examples like Airbnb. There are boatloads of specialized Airbnbs right now, like the beach Airbnb, the sporting weekend Airbnb, and so on and so much. The thing to remember is too much structure is going to kill your creativity. You're going to lose your edge, and that happens too. That's why the road is littered with lots of dead tech companies. They became too much about company and not about the innovation. But what do I do if I'm in a mature business and it's just not part of my culture anymore? Over the summer, I was listening to these guys talk from Goodyear and Goodrich, and all they said is, we're an old company. We're an old company. It's like, geez, stop making excuses. But the way that these larger companies realize is, look, internally we are not an inventive company anymore. And so what they do is they either go out and acquire it, and the best companies understand the balance between segregating them, leaving them alone to go do their own things, and also integrating them into the larger company. And so your big challenge, and this is what Bob Noyce, founder of Intel, said to me, and that's that, how do you build a company to last 100 years? When you have that kind of vision, that's the time to go make a company. And so in the last video, we'll start off by talking about the 5 forces.